the topic for our discussion today we define broadly as how CFOs need and should become business partners to their organizations and to their CEOs. You've probably heard many times over the past 10 years, if you ever go to any professional events, conferences, this has been one of the hot topics. But what we find also is that a lot of people are paying lip service to it without understanding what it is to be the business partner to CEO, why it is important, why it is value enhancing for the organization, why it's accretive to business. And so we thought we'd invite a practitioner who literally lives and works in the environment that stimulates this kind of approach to the interaction between the finance function and the rest of the organization. So John Carroll comes from a very big name. So he's with Siemens Energy, which was spun off the big Siemens mothership a couple of years ago. And this company focuses solely on the energy products, meaning the power generation and distribution. So Jerry is what I would call a mini CFO within an organization, right, Jerry? Because he is essentially a CFO for one of the business units. His full title is very long. Bear with me. It's Director of Finance for Global Manufacturing and Repair Optimization for Industrial Application Service Business Unit. So, but to me, again, I've known Jerry for some time now. Have been introduced through our common contacts at Siemens. We spoke several times. What he's doing, and to me, he is this proper divisional or unit CFO, and so he knows a lot about what's going on in the organization, and was kind enough to let us in on some of the secrets of how organizations adopt and proliferate this kind of environment. So, Jerry, why don't we start with the easiest possible lead? Why don't you tell us very briefly about your career within Siemens?
Sure.
And then we'll progress into matters of higher order.
Yeah, so I'm one of the rare people that have spent most of their career, if not all of their career, with one company. It used to be more common in the past, but now it's I think a pretty rare feat these days. But I did start with a company called Westinghouse in their power generation 20 plus years ago. Siemens AG acquired us, which, if you're not familiar, it's a global company based in Germany, very comparable to GE. We competed with GE on almost every front for 50 plus years, I would say now. And I started with, as I said, with Westinghouse, working in their general basic accounting functions. At the time, I moved to Charlotte to work in one of the manufacturing plants for Westinghouse. At that same time, Siemens acquired Westinghouse. And we'll talk a little bit more about it, but that's really where I got my kind of first real introduction to what it really means to be a business partner, as it's something that Siemens really, really values. But I spent some time in Charlotte in manufacturing and cost accounting roles, and then taking over the accounting and planning functions for the factory. I then moved to New Jersey to head up our industrial service group. At the time, Siemens had bought two other companies of very similar size. So with Westinghouse, Siemens, and then the industrial assets of Alstom and the Demag de Lavelle industrial assets, we had four companies of roughly the same size merged together. And that's really where you get a chance to experience and see different cultures in action from a corporate standpoint. So I headed up that operation. I was the CFO of the legal entity there. And as Lubin indicated, a kind of a small operational CFO. It was about 200 million in revenue. In 2011, I I left that role and came back to start up our gas turbine factory here in Charlotte. At the time, we looked at remaking our footprint, and we closed a factory in Canada, built a new factory right behind the existing factory in Charlotte, and consolidated some operations from Orlando and other locations to set up our gas turbine operations here. I ran those for 6 years, from startup to about 700 employees, 400,000 manufacturing hours. And at the time, I was ready for a new opportunity, so I went back to the industrial group. This time, heading up an organization tasked to optimize our manufacturing and repair footprint for our industrial group. And similar, when I left that organization that I talked about to where I came back, we had bought 2 more companies, much larger. And now we went from a small group of 4 companies in a total global billion in revenue. We had now bought 2 more companies, and we're now at 3 billion in revenue in that industrial space. And so that's what the last 4 years I've been really focused on, is how do we optimize this manufacturing footprint? How do we grow our repair business and really leverage all the different installed bases and different companies that we have now acquired? How do we leverage that and really become one company, but really drive those operations forward as one company while preserving the heritage and the installed base of all those existing companies? So and that's what I've been doing for the last 4 years. And so my old operational partner, Brian Maragno, who's the head of Charlotte now, the Charlotte operations, he got in touch with Liebem, and then he had directed him to me to say, hey, you should meet Jerry. He was my partner as we ramped up the Charlotte operations. He'd be someone good that could talk about this particular topic of finance as a partner to operations. So
thank you, Jerry. We all got the picture that this is a very, very complex organizational structure and business structure. In this respect, I guess the involvement of the role of finance was almost inevitable for Siemens, right?
Yeah.
So why don't you take us through the paces, so to speak? Let's define first what it is to be a business partner to the organization for a finance executive within an organization as complex as Siemens, and how that, what that brings to the organization, how that notion, how those principles are embedded in what Siemens does, how they came to the realization that this is the way forward, this is the way to develop this kind of competency. Tell us more about that.
Sure. So with Siemens, and it's really one of the drivers that kept me as part of the company for so long, but even from the start, from the time we were acquired, Siemens' philosophy was really what they called their 4 eyes principle. So meaning 4 eyes can make a better decision than just 2. So they did not have what was considered a CEO principle. They had this 4 eyes principle, which elevated the CEO and CFO at basically the same level, regardless of where you were in the organization, whether that's a plant manager and his controller or the top end CEO and CFO. They really stressed that it was a dual partnership. The CFO reporting line had always been and continues to be separate, although it's blending a little bit. There was really 2 separate reporting lines in the organization. One was the operational, and then one was that CFO, that financial role, to really assert the independence of the finance function, but really to be that partner. And really the expectation is you don't agree to any business decision, you don't sign off on any major contracts or agreements without that dual signature, without that full agreement. So for me, and part of it is really, I got that experience in the factory, which I think is one of the best places to learn how to be a partner and to really understand what finance's role can be, is in a factory where you're forced into really understanding the issues and the business aspects and the operational aspects and how they influence the performance of the operation, but also how they influence the financials. So really the expectation throughout my career has really been that finance function is really a part of that operational team. It's part of that staff. And really, we're called to and challenged to really become that true partner. So the opportunity is you get involved a lot more of the business than just focusing on reporting, control, those type of aspects. But there's also the challenge that it really forces you to really learn and understand that business. It gives you the opportunity for sure across the organization. And, even Siemens Energy is a 90,000 employee organization. So for sure, you have varying levels of how much people embrace that, both on the technical and the financial side. But I think really our opportunity, how much you push in and dig into the topics and really get involved in those operational reviews and discussions really allows us to become what I think is a very powerful influence in the organization. Because even some of the best technical or most financially savvy technical and operational leads generally can't bridge the financials to the operations as well as we can bridge the operations to the financials. And as you go up in the sphere, as you start reporting to higher and higher executives, the expectation is you really know the finances, you really know how it's going to impact your profit and loss, your cash flow, your business metrics. Really, I think we have the opportunity, have that background and that solid foundation, that we can bridge the two and really influence the overall performance.
You mentioned that a lot depends on the interaction between two or more functions that are not necessarily naturally predisposed towards each other, right? Just basically because of the differences in the theory behind what you do, in practices such as technical personnel and finance personnel. How is it for you to get immersed in the operational matters, probably working with engineers or with other technical people, just trying to kind of see things from their point of view? How difficult was it? What did you do to kind of blend into that modality?
Yeah, I mean, my experience has really been, it requires a lot more effort on our part, right? So I spend a lot of my time in meetings that maybe traditionally a finance person doesn't need to be a part of. Engineering reviews, detailed operations reviews, product reviews, really trying to understand and become part of that business. And really, for me, it's really that's the key to it, right? One, the way we get in the door is we bring our finance expertise, right? We answer those financial questions that our technical colleagues need help with. But the way we influence is really by learning and understanding how the operations run and what are the real influencers there. And there you have to get, I spend time on the shop floor. I spent time in meetings that traditionally wouldn't be something I needed to attend, but it was really more because I knew I was going to build a learning and a history and a knowledge up that will pay off later. And I coach and lead, my own team, but I also have other people that I mentor. And that's the energy efficient lights cut out on me. But so really I encourage that a lot, to say, particularly young financial leaders. I've been mentoring a young lady that took over managing one of our operations. And for me, it was a really opportunity to talk to her about, hey, you really got to get in and learn those meetings, partner with and build relationships with your technical colleagues. And I was talking about this very function with my current partner, who's based in the Netherlands, and we spent a lot of time together traveling. Unfortunately, a lot less in the last 2 years, but he was laughing about it. He said, well, we did spend a lot of time late at night together over some beers, and really, I mean, inevitably, as you talk business the whole time, right? And you mix a little bit of personal in with it, but really building those relationships, whether that's being involved in those meetings, being involved in the afternoon discussions, or even in the evening discussions over a beer, I think really helps to, you learn the business and then you really can start bridging and bringing in your financial background into those discussions.
Okay, let me reverse the question a little bit because I really would like to examine this more. So, from the point of view of you integrating within technical or more technical teams, or establishing these bridges with your colleagues, understood. But from your own point of view and from your end, did you also engage your non-finance partners, your non-finance colleagues, in some way to raise awareness, for example, of financial issues, raise awareness of, I don't know, difference between cash flow and budgets, so that they understand too what their decisions or the options they are reviewing, what it leads to, how it impacts the bottom line?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I would do is I did do training sessions of, finance training for non-finance managers to really bring out that and really raise awareness to how their decisions impact the financial results, and really spend that time to educate them, but also to talk about what those impacts mean as we're making those decisions or going through those issues. How does that hit the profit and loss statement? What are the cash impacts? Really working with them to educate them on the financial aspects. And that's one of the when talking again with my current partner, and I asked him, what has been the benefits from his experiences, and that was one of the things he really focused on is, hey, you've increased my financial knowledge and awareness significantly by having that interaction and really influencing the decisions, but really explaining why what the impact of those decisions is on the financials. And I think that's really a job for us as educators too, to help bridge that gap so that they can start thinking about those topics before they make a decision as opposed to afterwards, right?
Understood. I mean, everything you've told us so far, and again, referring to our previous discussions with you, it's pretty clear that this culture of outside of the box, outside of the silo thinking and acting is pretty much entrenched with Siemens. Everyone, I just want to mention that according to their internal guidelines, for example, if CEO is living on vacation, or I don't know, is absent temporarily from his role, then CFO steps in. Correct, Jerry?
Yeah, and again, I'm with one company, right? So I don't know exactly how frequent that happens in other places, but within Siemens, it's very common for the CFO to step in to fill the role of a CEO as needed. So, and as an example, in my current role, our current business unit CEO and CFO, our current CEO is on a special assignment. So he's on a 6-month assignment. We have a pretty big restructuring of our operations going on right now, and he was asked to take a special assignment for 6 to 9 months. And our CFO was then asked to fill the dual role of CEO and CFO during that time. So our CEO has a pretty extensive operations team. I mean, it could have easily been one of our key product line leads gets temporarily assigned to that, or even some of our support functions could have been assigned to that. But really, generally, it's the CFO that is asked to step in and take that function, particularly, if it's interim, someone leaves into a new role until they backfill that role, or in this case, for a special assignment, that the expectation is that the CFO generally, or that financial partner generally, will take over and run that operation.
And do you know, and again, you've been with the company for a very long period of time. Do you know at which point Siemens started looking at transitioning from the classic traditional role of finance as just a service provider, guardian of assets to some extent, to being the partner to other parts of the organization? Do you know at which point it happened?
No, I don't really. for me, it's always been that setup. But the one thing maybe that I want to add is there is a bit of a dual finance setup within Siemens. You have what we call business controlling and business administration. And business controlling is your typical reporting, accounting functions. That's a separate silo from the business administration, which is where I live and reside. It's really how do we support the operation. So there is a bit of an overlap in many cases of it could be a dual role, but really that business administration function has always been that CFO or that partner role. But unfortunately, fortunately, I guess it's always been my experience. So it hasn't been a big shift. I think we touched on a little bit. The bigger shifts are when we have companies that are integrated into this operation through acquisition. That's where generally the exposure comes.
And that was my next question. So again, given that you kind of blended into Siemens coming from Westinghouse, and then you watched the acquisition of Westinghouse unfold, and then participate in Preston Rand acquisition yourself. Obviously, these are different companies, and quite possible the culture, the internal culture, the working culture within those companies is very different to what Siemens is pursuing, what Siemens professes. So can you tell us about this integration of cultures, specifically along the lines of this finance as partnership logic? What you experienced, what you saw as working well, what did not work well? I mean, what kind of challenges you guys had to overcome? I mean, you personally and your entire organization. That would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, I think the first acquisition, and now it's been quite a few years ago, the Westinghouse acquisition, that was more of a combination or a clash of two cultures, of a German culture and a US based culture, right? Both still had pretty strong corporate structures, Westinghouse as well. So I think the finance merger and the relationship there, while it was truly a more of a CEO culture to go into this to the Four Eyes principle culture, I think that was generally a smoother transition. There it was really taking a very traditional German culture company versus a very traditional US, and that conflict and storming and then norming, and but that one generally went pretty smoothly. For sure there was it took some time, but that one I'd say generally went pretty smoothly. And over the years, I think Siemens culture has become much more international than it was back then, and that's also opened it up quite a bit. I'd say the more recent one was the Dresser Rand acquisition, and that one has been a bit more of a rocky, may not be a fair term, but it was a bit more of a clash of cultures, where there you had a clear CEO based culture. It was a very entrepreneurial culture, which on the one hand was very good, but it really had a lot of independence and autonomy guided towards that CEO and that leadership function. So there was that transition was much more challenging. And I think it was challenging both on the finance side and the operations side, and really how willing you are and how willing organizations are to open up to and be part of a new culture tends to determine how well they succeed in that. So we've had a lot of people choose to leave the organization from it. More of the cultural aspects of it than really the finance partnership, I would say. But on the finance side, I think it's been twofold, right? The finance team, certain members of the team were able to embrace it. Quite a few really didn't quite make the jump to become that more operational partner, as opposed to traditional service function type finance role. And that was quite challenging for a lot of the professional colleagues on the finance side to really understand that, hey, yours is not just to report and consolidate, yours is to get involved and understand the issues and challenge the decisions and challenge the topics. And I think there's quite a bit of It's taken a while for some people to embrace it. Others, if you've got a flexible mindset and are open to learning and being part of the operations, it can come pretty quickly. On the technical side, I would say there you have that same issue. You have some guys that want that ownership, want that I own the whole thing. I don't really need a partner. They had a much more rocky time with it. My current partner, he's based in the Netherlands, and he came from that dresser environment, and he really embraced it and appreciates it. I talked to him about, what are some of the things that really influenced him, and he talked to me about, well, one is I've really been able to build his financial awareness and understanding up, like we talked about, how do we help train those technical colleagues. But then he also said he really appreciated the challenging nature and approach that I bring to the topics, where one, he has that sparring partner, he has someone to bounce ideas off of that will get challenged, but also that the finance team and certainly myself are willing to challenge people on their business case. It's easy to make a business case say what you want it to say, right? If you want to buy a new asset, you can sell it enough and build a pretty enough story around it to say, oh yeah, this is going to make a lot of sense. Having someone willing to step in and challenge that and really have the knowledge and understanding to challenge the operational aspects of it from a finance side, he told me has been very powerful to him and has helped along that fashion. Right. So it's really what you want and what your team is open for. And I think if I look at it from a CEO perspective, maybe being completely detached from my current experiences, it's got to be something they have to decide. What do I want from my team, and what I want from that finance function? Do I want someone off to the side that's just going to do the reporting aspects, or do I want someone engaged in the business, challenging it, really helping the team understand how the decisions they make can influence the financials, and being willing to call them out when they see that they're creating and bringing undue risk into the organization.
I have a quick question.
Understood.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
Jerry, how was you said you have your partner is in the Netherlands? Was that partnership obvious, or how did the partnerships come together?
Well, I mean, that's he was in the role already. So we have that finance function and that technical function, the two leaders of the operation. So he was in the role through the acquisition. They merged the organizations and built this manufacturing and repair optimization organization. He was tasked to lead that. I had the finance person they had in there didn't work out, so they were looking for a new finance lead, and that's when they reached out and contacted me. So as a partner, we were assigned, he was the operational lead, I was the finance lead for this function. Did that help, Tom? Or
Yeah, I just didn't know how obvious it is, with the partnerships, but you kind of explained it. It's a finance and operations synergy, right?
Yeah, it's a kind of a CEO, CFO concept on various scales in our organization.
Yeah, thank you.
Jerry, so given all the benefits of adopting this partnership approach, and given the very enabling environment that Siemens appears to provide for this type of cooperation, if you were to pick like one example, one project you've been part of that literally and really epitomizes the benefits, the value of this partnership approach, what would it be? Could you tell us anything about that?
Yeah, I would say the one project that I've really been involved in most significantly is reshaping our manufacturing footprint, right? So through these acquisitions and through the market changes in energy, which I'm sure everyone's aware of, the strong push as we migrate away from carbon-based energy into carbon-free or minimum carbon, however you want to phrase it. And through our acquisitions, we've inherited and taken on a lot more footprint from a manufacturing space than we need, right? So we were probably 60% too big several years ago, where we had to come back and say, okay, what should this footprint look like? And we did a very robust project where we talked about, looked at really what is our current product portfolio, what do we want to build in the future, what do we need, what is the customer asking for, what do we see as the future opportunities, and then from there we analyzed our footprint of probably 6 major manufacturing facilities and 10 plus repair centers, and said, okay, we need to come up with a way to figure out what's the right setup, what facilities do we close, what facilities do we expand, and go through that. And I was asked to be a part of that. And I think there we had a joint operations and finance team. Although the finance team was just a handful of us, we was much more on the operational side. But really, the accumulated knowledge that I've been able to build up from an operational perspective and from a manufacturing perspective, as being that partners, getting involved in those day-to-day operational discussions, really gave me the background and understanding to really be a very active member of the team, an influential member of the team. So as opposed to just consolidating the financial impacts of these decisions, I was really able to be involved and help steer and influence the decisions and decide, what facilities do we close, how much outsourcing do we do, where do we outsource, where do we focus on doing manufacturing in-house. And I was able to really be a part of that and influence those decisions on a more operational basis, much more than financial. But I have that financial knowledge, so I know quickly, hey, how is it going to develop, and what is the outcome going to be? Is it going to be big enough for the targets that we have? Do we have to make a larger decision, or do we challenge a decision to go deeper into outsourcing, et cetera? It really enabled me to become an active member of the team by having that background and that experience.
Tell me, after all these years, if you were to plot a graph where here you are being the finance person, and here is where you are now. What is your professional blood type now? Is it 50% finance, 50% operations? Is it 30% finance and 30 operations, and I don't know, 40 engineering? What's the score?
Well, I won't claim to have any engineering blood. So we operate in too highly technical of a product for me to claim engineering blood. But certainly I would say I'm still at heart a finance person, but I really do enjoy the operations and being an active part of it. I've thought several times about leaving finance and taking a full operational role. I haven't at this point, but I'm certainly open to that. So I would say I'm probably still 60% finance, 40% operations. So I still give the nod on the finance side, I would say.
Excellent. Okay, great. I think we have, about 20 minutes now, right, Tom? Shall we open up for questions?
Yeah, we have about 20 minutes left.
Hi, I'd like to ask Jerry a question. Jerry, you know, working for a German company as well. I recognize the long term and the 4I. I was with Hapag-Lloyd for about 30 years, so we're right up the street pretty much in Germany. Apprenticeship is a big thing with German companies, and I'm wondering, with respect to the U.S. staff and getting them into the operations or leaning them toward operations, was there any job sharing? Was there any structured apprenticeship for new staff? What did you have as far as onboarding for transitioning, or not even transitioning, but just learning the operations?
On the finance side?
On the finance side for
Yeah.
new staff.
No, I would say we didn't have an apprenticeship program or something to that effect. I think really what I've tried to do through my experiences is set those same type of expectations. So anytime I bring an analyst on, a cost manager, I've really always set those expectations that our foundation is finance, right? We still have to be the leaders in control, the leaders in financial understanding and risk management, and that's our core. I said, but to really excel, I've always implemented that, hey, you have to really embrace and get involved in the operations side. And it's an interesting thing I think about quite a bit these days, where we've spent the last 2 years largely working from home, right? And I think for the newer employees, the people coming up, it's going to be more challenging to insert themselves into those discussions and those operations when you're outside and maybe working from home all the time. You're not forced into it. You're not being pulled into a meeting. I think it's really going to be incumbent on us as leaders is continuing to educate and influence that. So I would say, Mike, it's really been mostly all just how the leaders influence it, as opposed to having a good apprenticeship program on the finance side, so to speak.
Great. Thanks.
Did you have in your company, did you guys have an apprenticeship program like that, or?
In Germany, we did, and we would bring them over periodically and cycle them through the various departments within the organization.
Yeah.
So, we would have them spend some time in the customer service section on documentation or on operations in vessel handling. So we would cycle them in, but primarily they were German. We had nothing established for the US employees.
Yeah.
So what we would do internally is develop our own curriculum, so to speak.
Okay.
To cycle an employee throughout, not for any long-term period, short, very short term, but to cycle them throughout the organization to get a feel for that operations, because it's so critical. It really is. It gives you a different, from a finance side, it gives you a really different perspective when you can really see what the operations are doing and what's in it for what's. So no, it's. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So Jerry, you're kind of in a segment of Siemens Energy, is that correct?
Yeah.
Tell us how do you operate with the, I guess, the mothership executive leadership team? I mean, how often you guys meet? I mean, how do you get information, 360 with them?
Yeah. So, and I guess it depends on the level, right? So we have, and what I alluded to, we're going through a bit of an organizational restructuring as well. But our current setup is we would have from Siemens Energy, right? So we've spun off 1.5 years ago from Siemens AG. And so we have our CEO and CFO and our board there. And then below that, we have divisions. So we have 3 main divisions right now. And then below that, we have business units and then what we call business segments. So the business unit level, which is the industrial service group that I work in, that's where I would say we have the most interaction with the business unit leads. And there, we have monthly operational reviews. On the special projects I'm in, I have a monthly review with our CEO and CFO on the financial side, and then we have bi-weekly meetings on the operational developments on those special projects. Beyond that, I think the normal operations, they have monthly reviews with that business unit lead, and then quarterly, I review these special projects with our division CEO and CFO. So that, for my exposure or my experience on these special projects, that's really how we have that interaction. And then typically on a yearly basis, we might have a interaction with the energy board itself. But those are usually ad hoc and not necessarily where you want to be in terms of, it usually means something went sideways, right? So does that help kind of explain what you were looking for, Tom?
Yeah, because you guys are obviously a huge company. What's the top line of Siemens Energy?
Oh, I think it's 11 billion.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
Okay. More questions? Okay, let me ask you, a lighter-hearted question then, Jerry. So going back to your initial days of being integrated with operations and with all the people who wouldn't know, well, maybe not the first thing about finance, but definitely who would perceive finance as just somebody doling out cash. Were there any funny moments, going both ways? Like, did you find yourself at a table at any point, again, in the beginning of this journey, wondering what is it they're talking about? I mean, I can understand all these words separately, but I literally don't understand what's going on here. Or did you misuse any kind of technical terms, made everyone at the table laugh, then took revenge on them when they came back just asking for advice on the budgeting?
Yeah, well, people always knew they had to be careful around me, right? Because we still had monthly financial reviews and operational reviews that I could return the favor pretty quickly if they were too hard on me. But no, I mean, I can't think of a specific instance. I was talking to my partner Rob about this. He's like, well, he said, I don't know about funny moments, he said, but we've definitely had a lot of fun late nights together, building that relationship. And that's the case, and to me, that's really what a lot of this has been about, is how do you build that strong relationship with that partner, right? And I did the same with Brian. I mean, I've been fortunate that my last two technical partners, I've been able to build really good relationships and build actually friendships out of them more as much as business relationships. And again, that's really just being open and questioning and building a good relationship with it, whether that's over a beer or over, like I said, a late night project, whatever the case may be. But I'm sure there are quite a few funny moments that things I've said and done. I mean, and really the role of coming back to Charlotte in the manufacturing setup for gas turbine, it's a pretty challenging environment to be in, because it's a highly engineered, highly technical precision product, right? And we have world-class engineers, people the best in the world at what they do. And to try and, go walk into that relatively cold and influence how they're making decisions, or how they're operating the product, or setting up a manufacturing function, it can be a bit intimidating to go in and make those changes. And really, it's being confident in what you know, and really understanding what you don't know, and keeping to ask those questions. And maybe sometimes there's probably a lot of stupid questions I asked them, and things that they certainly would have thought I would have known, but you ask the questions, you learn, and then you move on. So
Sure.
Terry, you've been with this company your whole career, correct?
Through acquisition, but yes. Yeah.
So what is it about the culture that keeps you there and stimulated, and I guess I'm going to use the word happy?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's a number of things, Tom, and one is what I said, this ability to be that dual role of operational and financial, and not just being, pigeonholed into the financial aspects of it. Having that ability to really influence, impact the business has been one of the key things that's kept me here. The other thing is, while it's one company, it's a large company, right? And it's an international company, and it's afforded me a lot of opportunities that, while I say, yeah, I've been with the same company the whole time, I've probably every 3 or 4 years, I've taken a new role. I've moved 3 or 4 times. I've had a lot of opportunity to travel internationally, to work and meet with many different cultures. And my current role is a global role. Last week at night, I was meeting on the phone with people in Australia. 7 a.m. the next morning, I'm meeting with people in Europe. So I've had the opportunity really to get a lot of broad and interesting experiences from it. And I've put a lot of time in and performed well. And Siemens has rewarded that by giving me more and more interesting opportunities. So I think it's not something I ever intended to say I'll stay with this company for my career, but it just happened that, hey, as I performed, I got other opportunity to expand and grow and learn, and it's been a good fit.
Was there any change in the culture after the spinoff?
No, I would say the biggest change has been we're that much closer to the street, to the market. So even though it's still a large company, we got one layer away from, or one layer closer to, reporting quarterly results mean that much more, right? So the sense of urgency and the sense of focus on cash flow has grown more significantly than in the past. When you're, at one point Siemens had 475,000 employees. So when you're that big, you tend to, in specific operations, you tend to be a bit buffered by the mothership, as someone had said, from a cash perspective or a sense of urgency. Well, that's been pared down quite a bit now, and we are more on that tip of the spear. Now, I've helped my brother-in-law, who had a small business of about 10 million in annual revenue. So cash flow there means a whole lot more than cash flow at Siemens Energy. It's still, it's making payroll versus, okay, hey, are we going to have a good or bad month or quarter, or maybe have to borrow a little more or a little less. So that exposure is a little bit different than something that from the spinoff. But I think we're embarking on some more change, and our market and the pressure to decarbonize is going to continue to really weigh heavily on our organization and influence it quite a bit in the future. So I think we're going to have to be more of a flexible and changing culture than maybe what Siemens has been accustomed to in the past.
Great.
Are you confident in the Siemens leadership that you can make those pivots?
I think so. Yeah. I think one of the things, we have a lot of really strong market understanding in our company, right? So, and for sure there's challenges, right? The vast majority of what profit we earn today is on that legacy historical carbon-based business. And to make that shift, we're going to have to really have the right focus on, are we getting into the right markets? And are we still able to really perform in those existing markets? Because it's not going to go away overnight. It's going to take time. And so how do you continue to leverage the existing footprint, but also pivot to the new opportunities that will inevitably come from this?
Jerry, don't fret. Just declare your turbines can run on hydrogen. People don't understand what it is. It's fine, but you get thumbs up.
Yeah. We're doing a lot of work with hydrogen right now, so a lot of development activities there.
Yeah. Sounds like you have a lot of fun in front of you, Jerry.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be, wow. I think every industry, right? It's stability is, if it ever existed, it's definitely in the past, right?
That's right.
Well, thank you, everyone. I hope it was interesting and informative enough to be an hour well spent.